What's going on, everyone, from Overtime Heroics? My name is Dave Podolsky, and I'm joined today with Victor Lamingosta Henry. He's set to return to the octagon on October 15th against Raphael Assuncao. Victor, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, man.
And just first off, how this fight with Assuncao coming together? He's been around for a long time, and how's training going?
It's been going good, man. I mean, I think this is the longest camp I've ever had, and I don't like it. Most of my fights for most of my career have been, like 3 week notice, 4 week notice. I think the longest one I had before this one was, maybe a 5 or 6 week camp. 8 week camp is brutal, and I could just imagine what these guys go through, knowing that they have 12 weeks for a fight or whatever. That's insane. Naturally, from an experience perspective, like the longer you get to prepare, you would think that you push for longer, but that's not the case at all. Like you want to make sure that your body is healthy for the hard parts. I know some people that through an 8 week camp, they go hard for 2 weeks, they take it easy for another week, and then they go another hard for the 3 weeks, and then easy, and then cut week. It's just it's weird to have this long to train.
Mm-hmm. How does that compare to a short notice fight?
I think the short notice fights are better. I pretty much stay in the gym anyways, so I'm always training. The intensity changes according to when I do have a fight. So, of course, if I have 1 month to prepare for a fight, I'm already in the gym. I've already been getting at it, so I have a week or two of like really hard, intensive training towards a certain opponent. But then the rest of the time, it's okay. Well, focus in your game plan and then lose the weight and then fight. I don't know. I guess that's just the way I prefer it.
Is it easier in terms of making weight, or are you someone who you don't get that far, above 35 anyways?
I don't get that far above it. I really am not a proponent of these big cuts. My coach Josh Barnett is, he thinks the cutting part of this game is ridiculous, and he's a heavyweight, so he never really even had to cut. But we've seen examples in the UFC of these fighters. They cut down to a different weight class, and they just don't look good at all. When TJ fought Henry Cejudo at 25, when Cody fought Kai Kara France, these are not good examples of people cutting a bunch of weight and losing. Even we've had a few fighters who go up weight classes and they do a lot better. What's it called? I guess your favorite color is orange. Yeah, I'm sitting in the office and her desk is orange as hell. But oftentimes we find that when fighters go up in weight class, it's actually better. So, I always keep my weight around 152, 153. That's usually my usual weight. And cutting down to 35 is tough, but it's not the hardest. And and what's more important is that even though you beat the scale the day before, you still have to beat the person the next day.
Yeah, and certainly with weight cuts, I think one of my favorite examples is Robert Whitaker, a guy who always struggled to make 170. It was kind of middle of the road 170, goes to 85, champion, always a top contender. So I think the fact that you're able to keep your weight down, I think that's definitely big for you. And you talked about your coach, Josh Barnett. You train at UWF in Southern Florida. How much has he helped you just being able to watch him? He's a former champion.
Well, I mean, it's a lifetime of martial arts as a coach. A lot of times the fighters, they get a coach who's knowledgeable in the game. They have their black belt in jiu-jitsu, whatever, but they never really fought. So it's kind of like how can you really coach somebody in something that you've never done yourself? There's a lot of coaches that have been great coaches as far as game planning and being able to run a good camp. But there is something to be said about understanding about what your fighter is going through. When I'm having bad rounds because I'm just having bad rounds, maybe something isn't just clicking for me or something's not working for me, whatever it is, it is what it is. But having a coach that's understanding towards it is a huge plus.
And so for your last fight, you were a massive underdog around plus 350. This time around, you're the favorite. You're minus 330. Are the betting odds, is that something you pay attention to? And did that kind of change your mindset at all?
It doesn't change my mindset at all. At the end of the day, all these fights are the same. Somebody's going to punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. whether I fought in chicken coops, whether I was whether I was the favorite, whether I was the underdog, they're all the same. The guy across from me is trying to punch me in the face.
And you're someone, it took you a while to get to the UFC. You're 35, but your UFC debut is one of the best debuts of the year so far. And do you think your story is kind of one that shows like even as you get into your mid 30s, you can still make that run to the UFC?
Yeah, it is what it is as far as the timing. I've there's a lot of fighters in the UFC who have not experienced the world like I have. But then again, there are a lot of fighters outside of the UFC who have experienced the world, but nobody knows about them because they didn't fight in the UFC. Um, you know, when I got into initially when I got into fighting, it was about fighting and it was about traveling and it was about experiencing the world. And there's so much more as fighters than just what you see on the TV. For instance, I like muscle cars, I like anime, I like reading mangas, I like food, I like all these things. But the only thing that people are exposed to is my fighting, which is cool because the fighting is the platform that I've used to really explore all the other things that I like in my life. But you know, having traveled the world and having fought in different organizations and many different many different people, it led me here eventually, and I got to be happy about that.
Do you think you should have gone to the UFC earlier? I'm sure you do. And why do you think you were overlooked for so long? Because most guys at 20, you got into the UFC at I believe 21-5, and most guys 26 career fights, and for your 21 wins at 26 are going to be in the UFC by that point.
Yeah, you would figure that, but there's no rhyme or reason. I mean, look at me. We got Bo Nickel getting in there, and he's 3-0. But he's Bo Nickel. I'm not a Bo Nickel. We have that young kid at 17 years old getting into the UFC. And then you have guys like me, getting into the UFC with my record. And then, well, what about Michael Chandler? The world knew about Michael Chandler before he even signed with the UFC. Everybody just has a different road, man, and our roads are all different. So the fact that we get there and have a certain level of experience before getting there really it's really to our benefit to have the experience before getting into the big show. You don't want to get into the UFC and then start building from there. You want to be established and make a run for it. I'm not here to waste my time, UFC's time, or the fans' time. I want to get in there and I want to start going for it.
And Assuncao is a guy who's been sort of a staple of the bantamweight division. If you win this fight, are you looking at top 15 next? And what are your goals going forward?
My goals are, of course, I'm gonna start marching towards the top, no matter who's in front of me. I think a win over Assuncao is, it's gonna be sweet, obviously, because it's another W on my record. But the fact that he is so experienced, he's been in there with with basically everybody, and he has wins over notable people. This is just gonna be another great fight. That's with two experienced individuals.
Have you gone to watch any of his previous fights? And is that, a big part of how you train?
Of course, he's been around, and I've been a fan for a long time. So the fact that I get to share the cage with him is an honor.
What do you think gives you the advantage over him?
I think that I've taken less damage than he has over the past. Actually, I shouldn't say the past. I think over the entirety of my career. He's had more fights, obviously, but I think he's actually taken more damage than I have. So I'm not, I'm thinking that my head is a little bit more intact than his. We're both old guys. I'm not as old as he is, but we're both old guys. But I'm a little bit younger, so maybe I have age on my side. Who knows? I do think that he's going to be unpredictable though, because the reality of the situation is he's fighting. He's probably thinking that he's fighting for his spot in the UFC. So I can't take that lightly. I figure he thinks this is do or die, and I have to be ready for somebody who is who is going to be unpredictable. He's going to swing wild. He's going to wrestle hard. Everything that he's going to do is to the best of his ability in order to stay in the UFC.
And so let's say all goes well and you beat Assuncao. Do you want a third UFC fight by the end of the year? And if not, then, early 2023, what's your timeline?
It really depends on my body, man. I mean, we're both old, and if we go out there and we have a banger, I don't expect it would be a banger, but if we do go out there, then I'm gonna make sure that my body is rested before I go into another 8-week camp. But if I'm good and I'm ready to go, I can see myself getting in there and back in December.
And it'll end up being close to 9 months since your last fight with Raoni Barcelos. Was it frustrating having that layoff? Was that due to injury, or do you think that gave you the proper time you needed to heal from that fight?
All the above. You treat these little injuries that you get while you're at practice. You can't predict exactly how every practice is going to go, and sometimes you get these little, your little bumps and bruises here and there. And the worst thing. I mean, I was offered a fight in June or July, but I was having some problems with some injuries and stuff, and I didn't want to jump into an 8 week or a 6 or an 8 week camp already being hurt. That's not smart for a fighter to do. So, I wanted to make sure that I was set to go once I was healthy, have a camp, and then stay healthy through camp.
And with Raoni Barcelos, that's a guy where when you made your debut, he was a big prospect. No one really gave you a shot, and then you went in and dominated that fight. First off, did you get to see his performance last week? Because he looked fantastic. And second off, what was that for you coming in sort of as the unknown and then just putting on the performance that you did?
And like I said, it was what it was. Like I'm used to being the underdog. I'm used to people overlooking my skill set, and I don't blame too many people because, like I said, a lot of people, most people are UFC fans, not MMA fans. They don't watch what's going on in Pride or One or Bellator. They kind of demean all other leagues because it's not the UFC. The UFC has done a great job of promoting, marketing. I mean, not only for the common fan, but for athletes also. Like a lot of these athletes are either multimillionaires or they have a good life because of just the promotion of the UFC. But a lot of these guys in Bellator and ONE FC, they're struggling, even though they're top five. They're struggling because they're not the UFC. So the win over Barcelos is just another win to me. I mean, yes, I know he's great. Yes, I was in there with him, and seeing his fight last week, I was thinking to myself, damn, like that dude's a gangster. That guy's a boss. And I managed to pull a win over that. So I was actually, the better he does, the better it makes me look. So I'm glad for him.
I was just saying, just seeing the performance because he looked fantastic last week and he beat Trevin Jones unanimous decision. Just seeing how dominant he was in that fight, does that sort of give you a boost of confidence to be like, okay, like not only did I put on a great performance, but I put on a great performance against this guy who's clearly one of the most talented guys in the division?
Nah, not to me. I go in there and I do my thing, man. I mean, me personally, I should have finished Barcelos in the first, but I made a crucial mistake by clinching with him and trying to dirty box with him when I should have just kept my distance and finished it in the first. So in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I fought an extra 10 minutes when I didn't have to.
And just looking forward, what's your, October 15th, Victor Henry versus Raphael Assuncao. Give me your official prediction for this fight.
I'm thinking I'm having him out in 2.
2 minutes or 2 rounds?
Yeah, no, 2 rounds.
2 rounds?
If it's 2 minutes, then I'll be really happy, but I'm thinking I'm having him out by 2 rounds.
Fair enough. I think my final question, you have one of my favorite nicknames in the UFC, Lamin Gosta. That translates to the Mongoose, right?
Yes.
Where did that originate from?
Well, a lot of people don't know, but I'm half Mexican. And my dad has been calling me El Monstro since I was a kid. When Josh found out that I was half Mexican, he goes, "Well, let's give you a Spanish nickname so you can appeal to that side of the crowd." I was like, "Well, my dad's been calling me El Monstro since I was a kid." And he goes, "Nah, I'm gonna call you something else." And I was like, "Okay." And then he comes back the next day. He goes, "What about La Mangosta?" I was like, "Why the mongoose?" He goes, "Bro, because you're small. You like to get into shit, and then when things are getting nasty or feisty, motherfucker." I was like, "Oh well, okay, cool." I was like, "Yeah, you just called me a marmot. Thanks, man." But then again, Josh usually gives nicknames that are animals and little. I'm like, "Bro, like, what are you, a zookeeper?" Like, I have a teammate that was Keiji Tora, which is Cage Tiger, and he was Japanese. I had another teammate who was the Wolverine, but he nicknamed himself, so we'll give him a slide. But it was like, bro, you're like the zookeeper here, bro.
Fair enough. I guess we learned today that Josh Barnett loves animals.
Yeah, he loves animals.
Fair enough. You're in here first. Guys, Victor Henry returns to the octagon on October 15th when he takes on Raphael Assuncao. Victor, best of luck to you, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, man.